Okay, so carry on then. So I talked there about masturbation. Similar sort of issues going on with pornography as well. Again, it's a fantasy. It's like just something going on inside one's head. And in that sense, it's a deception. It's not real love. It's a sort of fake love, you might say. And it creates an emotional bond with an artificial world, which means that people generally, get involved in this world, lose the ability to bond with real people and have real relationships. And it's a bit like masturbation, sex without intimacy, and it leads to an emotional emptiness and disconnection. So people become empty. It's all just inside one's head. It's just like eating. If you overeat, you don't feel satisfied. And it's the same with these kind of things. Yeah, it's very unsatisfying, leads to low self-esteem and, increasingly sense of loneliness and being cut off from others because one's just living inside one's own fantasy world. It may be very unfulfilling and leads to addiction. And then after marriage, it also creates lots of problems as well. Okay, I'm not going to go through that. In the long run, pornography will not shore up a shaky ego. It will not fill the emptiness left from childhood wounds or abandonment. It will not save a shaky relationship or a failing marriage, and is not satisfying. In fact, it will magnify each emotional wound from the past and cripple your ability to meet your essential emotional needs, damage your ability to have a healthy relationship, and leave you unable to sexually or emotionally respond to your partner. So this is an American critic who wrote this, I think, in the early 80s. And as it now stands, students have a powerful images of what a perfect body is and pursue it incessantly. This is writing in the 1980s. Now, nowadays, it's even more the case. People, Instagram and Facebook, well, young people don't use Facebook anymore, just for the oldies. Instagram and all these things, people posting pictures of themselves or what they're eating, trying to create a certain kind of image of what they look like on the outside. And so people then have got a very clear idea what a perfect person is. It's about the physical body. And the whole emphasis then increasingly in the world in which we're living today is all about appearance. Yeah. And that's what people are pursuing, appearance. But deprived of literary guidance, this person happened to be a professor of literature. Deprived of literary guidance, they no longer have any image of a perfect soul, and hence do not long to have one. They do not even imagine that there is such a thing. So, one of the best ways in which to develop your inner life is to read classical literature. Jane Austen, Jane Eyre, not Jane Eyre, the Brontes, Dostoevsky, Tolstoy. You read this kind of literature and it develops your inner world. And you begin to be able to put yourself in the shoes of other people. And you can develop this inner world and go through all kinds of emotions and feelings as you experience what it's like to be these different characters in these different classical bits of literature. And Thomas Hardy as well. I only read one book by Thomas Hardy, Mayor of Casterbridge. Anybody here read any Thomas Hardy? No? Anyway. The great classical literature is really about real life. And Thomas Hardy, it's people getting into terrible situations. At the end of the book, you feel completely depressed because it's a real expression of reality. When people get involved in these relationships, they end up there. A lot of what you see in the movies is fake. You look at James Bond jumping in and out of bed with all kinds of women. Life isn't like that. People who live like that, they end up spiritually, emotionally dead and empty and messed up. So good literature, it presents an accurate description of the nature of reality, what happens when people go through this variety of different kind of experiences. Anyway, getting rid of bad habits, sometimes innate to make conditions, sometimes people pray, fast. People reckon it takes at least 40 days to break a habit because it takes a certain amount of time to rewire the brain. Might want to seek counseling or ask someone to. And cognitive behavioral therapy is very good in this regard. Change the way you think, change the way you feel, change the way you act. You become different. And self-help groups. If you become an alcoholic, which I don't expect anybody here is, there's Alcoholics Anonymous. 12 steps, and incredibly principled. First step is someone needs to recognize, I can't do it by myself. I need help from a higher power. And yeah, and our own spiritual community is High Noon, which is from America, which is very helpful. Anyway, so what about marriage? So Father talks about marriage. Why do you marry? So we can resemble God's image. So the image of God is God as being a masculine, unified being of masculinity and femininity, male and female, father and mother. So we get married so we can become like God, so we can resemble God's image. Because men and women are projection of God's divine characteristics. Their destiny is to form a union as one body and return to oneness with God's original character. So the purpose of marriage is to bring into oneness the realm of heart of one man, representing the world of masculinity, and one woman representing the world of femininity, so they may perfect the love between a man and a woman. So that's the purpose of marriage. This is the biblical purpose, the Christian purpose, Jewish purpose, Muslim purpose, and what true parents teach. Probably not what you hear about at school these days, but that's a problem. So there's two different realms, masculinity and femininity. What's the difference? Well, if you look at the brain, it's structured differently. Typical male brain, most of the connections go this way. Typical female brain, they go that way. And so you might think, well, how does that affect anything? So that means men tend to be better at parking cars, reverse parking, and women tend to be better at reading the room, looking at relationships, better verbal skills and intuitive abilities. So this is the way it often is. I remember when my sons used to come home from school, my wife would say, "How's your day?" They'd say, "Fine," and just carry on. It's a man's day. When my daughter came home from school, "How was your day?" It takes half an hour to go through all the different experiences and emotional ups and downs and etc., and lots of words to express all of that. Two guys the same shirt, we're brothers. Two girls the same shirt. So you might have seen this, Hollywood, for example, when one of the stars comes down, she comes down the stairs and she scans the entire room. If she sees another woman wearing the same dress as she's wearing, she goes back up to her room and gets changed. So I think it's deeply unfair. If you go into a department store, you find the ground floor is entirely covered with women's clothes. If you want to get some man's department, well, in the basement, there's a little corner of the basement where you can find men's clothes. I personally think, in the name of equality, there should be an equal amount of floor space devoted to men's clothing as to women's clothing. But it's not like that. Why is that the case? Because men and women are different. This is my wife packing, and my daughter wanted to have the suitcase 2 weeks before I go on holiday, and me, it's just 5 minutes before departure. A woman's brain, the typical female brain, it's all stereotypical, but there's a lot of truth in these things. Female brain, this is sort of stuff that's going on. And then male brain, that's what's going on. The reality is men and women are quite different. When you get married, you realize, gosh, this is a completely different world, which I never really encountered before. And there's some good books around, Why Men Don't Listen. My wife always, if you ask my wife, she'll say that's true. And Why Women Can't Read Maps. And men are from Mars, women are from Venus. They're stereotypical, but there's a lot of truth in a lot of these kind of observations from. So see, there's some basic differences. Men and women don't see in the same way. So who finds it easier to drive at night, men or women? Men find it easier. Why? Well, because one of the most annoying things in driving at night is there's other cars on the road driving towards you with their headlights on. And it's dazzling. Now, if you're a man, you have a one-track mind and you have a tunnel vision, and you just look straight ahead, and you're aware there's a car coming towards you, but you can ignore it. Whereas for women, the light comes in, and it's very, very distracting. And it's just a physiological thing. And I remember first discovered this when I was a child. And my mum and dad, they went to a party, and the next day they were talking about the party, and my mother said to my dad, "How was the party?" And my dad talked about the person he'd met and I was having a conversation with. And my wife said, "And did you see those two people talking to each other?" And my dad said, "No." "Did you see what kind of wallpaper they had?" My dad said, "No." "Did you see her shoes?" And my dad said, "No." And I thought there's something wrong with my dad's eyesight. But the reality is, when my mother was talking to somebody, at the same time she could observe everything else that was going on. Now, if you're a man like me, what I'm looking at is what I'm looking at. I can see. If I want to watch somebody else, I have to look at them. Now, if I was a woman, I could be looking at Stefania and watching Keiko. I can't, as a man, I can't look at Stefania and watch Keiko. But if I was a woman, I could. Isn't that true? Men don't know that. It's interesting. This is just a fundamental difference. It's entirely physiological. It's just the physiology of men and women is different. And it has a lot of consequences. And, female babies like faces, male babies like moving objects. These are just, from psychologists, they study these babies and children. Boys and girls play differently. So it's basically statistical averages. Mothers and fathers don't interact with kids in the same way. Women hear better than men. Men are more consistent than women. Female can verbally express emotions better than males. Men are attracted to youth and beauty. Women are attracted to status. Men that fall in love at first sight. Men initiate, women respond. These are just basic physiological aspects of differences between men and women. And so this subject-object thing, what's love and beauty? And the principle says, in a relationship between a man and a woman, the man is a subject partner giving love, while the woman is the object partner returning beauty. So this is the whole point of subject-object relationship. It's entirely about love. It's not about control. It's not about managing. It's not about ordering. It's not about obedience. It's all entirely about love and respect. And there's a very good book about that, love and respect, and that relationship. And, this is the book here. Well worth reading. Really brilliant insights there. Primary emotional needs for men and women, respectively. The men need respect, women need love. Like they need air to breathe. So why is marriage important? As Father says, the path is by which we seek true love. It's because it is a path for creating life. It's because the path in which a lineage of a man and woman are commingled. So it has that kind of aspect. Different aspects of marriage. The social aspect. That goes all the way back to Genesis. God said, it's not good that the man should be alone. I'll make him a helper fit for him. Yeah? So God recognized it's not good for a person to be alone. Yeah? We should exist in relationship, with friends, and then with marriage, and with children, and etc. And so marriage then is a couple, it's a partnership, people working together, cooperating together, doing things together. That's my wife's favorite word, is together. Why don't we do it together? Yeah. Not as an individual, but you're now a couple. It's also an emotional aspect to marriage for sustaining, healing, growth. It's a really important aspect there for healing each other. That's why Father said, when people get blessed in marriage, you're each other's Messiah. You're there to help this person to be healed of all the trauma and pain from the past. And an opportunity to be able to grow and to be able to develop. And, to change, become a better person. And there's also a sexual aspect to marriage, and the quality of sex depends on the quality of love. It says there, therefore a man shall hold fast to his wife, and they shall become one flesh. So again, this kind of vision there of becoming one, emotionally, spiritually, psychologically, and physically as well. And very important different dimensions there. Also intellectual dimension, enjoy talking to each other. My wife's next favorite word is communication. Let's talk about things, let's share. And, in one sense, the person you marry should be your best friend. The person you just enjoy spending time with. You enjoy sharing and talking about everything, about memories and experiences and etc., etc. And also a spiritual aspect of marriage as well, about faith and having a God-centered marriage and shared values. So when you marry, so when you go through a wedding, get married, you get God's blessing on the relationship. God's permission and wholehearted support for the relationship. So that's what Adam and Eve didn't do. They engaged in this relationship without God's blessing, without God's permission. So when they engaged in this relationship, a sexual relationship, they felt guilty. They knew they shouldn't be doing it, but they did it anyway. As a result of that, they couldn't invest themselves wholeheartedly because there was always this nagging feeling of guilt. But if you get God's blessing on your marriage and your sexual relationship, you can enjoy a sexual relationship wholeheartedly without any feeling, oh, I really oughtn't to be doing this. And also it means that you have the potential to experience God in every aspect of the relationship, leading to complete oneness. And so when it's a God-centered relationship, sexual relationship, it's actually much more meaningful, much more enriching, much deeper than when God's not there. Also, if you get married, have a wedding, you get your parents and families and communities' blessing and support. And that's incredibly important. You know, we want to have our parents' support for what we're doing. Now, we want to have our parents' blessing for what it is that we're doing. If we know that our parents don't support us, it's difficult. But if we're doing something, we know our parents support what we're doing. When you face a challenge, you feel, oh, my mum and dad, they support what I'm doing. I have their blessing on what I'm doing. And you get all this extra kind of energy comes along. But if you feel, oh, mum and dad told me not to do this, but I'm doing it, and you face a challenge, you don't get that extra energy, that extra support, and it's much easier to give up. So when you get God's blessing and you face some kind of difficulty, you can bring this difficulty in front of God. God, help me to love this person. And God will help you to love this person. God, help me to love my children so I don't throw them out the window. And God will help you to love your children. Because telling you, sometimes as a parent, you just feel like throwing your kids out the window. And I remember my parents, my mum used to say, you never realise how difficult it is bringing up children. And I said, I wasn't that difficult to bring up. Until you have children of your own. I said, what a load of rubbish. Anyway, mothers are always right. And, you know, when you have children of your own, you realise, my God, how do my parents put up with me? How do my parents not throw me out of the window? And, yeah, as I said, you know, when you have the God's blessing and your parents' blessing, suddenly you can turn to God and you get support and the ability to be able to love and to be able to overcome challenges, overcome difficulties. And, you know, when you invite God to be present and be there. And so this marriage then is more likely to be successful. It's not inevitable. Marriage is something that needs to be created. You have to work at it. It's hard work sometimes. You're investing in the relationship. But if you get married in that way, have God's blessing, your parents' support, and community's blessing, it's much more likely to be successful. This is just the statistics. So what's the meaning of sex? Husband and wife embrace each other in true love. It's equivalent to the universe becoming one body. This is your original image of creation brought into substantial reality in the context of God's ideal. So reality is women don't just want sex, they want to feel desired first. If a woman doesn't feel desired, when the sex itself may not seem to be so appealing. Many people already know how important this is. This is Greg Bayer, again, well worth reading. But in my clinic in New York, I see so many men and women who have no clue how important this is for women. Yeah, want to actually, really important that. And so, yeah, something we need to emphasize more in our own spiritual community. Okay, next part is going to talk about the fall, but I'm not going to because I know you've all heard lectures on it at workshops before. So, anyway, everything went wrong at the fall. So I'm going to give an example here of how things get restored, which we talk about change of lineage, purification of lineage. So because of what went wrong in the relationship between Adam, Eve and the archangel, then we understand that men inherited the archangelic nature to want to control and possess and have sexual relationships with women for their own pleasure and gratification. So that's the old Me Too movement. And, you know, if you're a woman, you will know, and met many men and encountered many men like that. They want to control, possess women, have sexual relationship with them for their own pleasure and gratification. And, you know, you come across lots of men who think they have the right to treat women in a particular way. That's the mind, the heart, the attitude of the archangel. So that's where you get all the sexual harassment and worse comes from. That gets inherited. Women, on the other hand, inherited the tendency to be seduced by powerful men and to be seductive. And again, that also you can see in the media all the time. So God then, this is all as a result of the fall, so how's that going to be reversed? How's this lineage, these attitudes and inherited patterns of behavior going to be changed and reversed so that people can be purified? So I just want to give you one example from the Bible. Okay, this is from Abraham, Sarah, and Pharaoh. You might have taught you this in the workshop before, I can't remember. So Abraham then and Sarah, who are husband and wife, they're traveling down from Haran into Canaan. When they arrive in Canaan, all the shops are closed, there's a famine, no food. So they carry on down into Egypt to stay there because there's lots of food. Egypt was a breadbasket of the ancient world. So when he's about to enter Egypt, Abraham said to Sarah, his wife, "I know that you're a beautiful woman beautiful in appearance, and when the Egyptians see you, they will say, 'This is his wife.' Then they will kill me, and they'll let you live. So say you're my sister, so it may go well with me because of you, and my life may be spared for your sake." So when Abraham entered Egypt, the Egyptians saw that the woman was very beautiful, and when the princes of Pharaoh saw her, they praised her to Pharaoh, and the woman was taken to Pharaoh's house, and for her sake he dealt well with Abraham. So you might wonder what actually happened in this story. Well, the Pharaoh then, who was the king of Egypt, he was God, he had absolute control, and so he heard that the most beautiful woman in the world had arrived in Egypt, so he sent Abraham and Sarah an invitation to come around for tea. They came around for tea, and Pharaoh was so enamored by Sarah's extraordinary beauty, he was so attracted to Sarah, he said, "Why don't you stay over for dinner?" And then after dinner they had coffee. And then the Pharaoh said to Sarah, "Why don't you stay the night? And Abraham, you can go and, there's a nice Airbnb just outside the palace, you go and stay there." Anyway, so Sarah stayed the night, and the next night, and the next night. And so she's living in this palace, and the complete luxury. She has, many silk clothes that she wanted to wear, and Jimmy Choo shoes, and she had a sauna and a Turkish bath, and people to paint her fingernails and toenails and brush her hair, and it was warm and lots of fruit, and it was just a life of complete luxury. Anyway, so after about a week living this life of luxury, the Pharaoh knocked on the door of her bedroom, and he came and sat down next to her, and he said, "Sarah, you're the most beautiful woman in the entire world. I would like to marry you, and you can become my number one queen," because he had about 100 other wives. "You can become my number one queen. You can become the queen of Egypt, the wife of the most powerful man in the entire world, and you can have servants and maids and live this life in complete and utter luxury." Anyway, he started chatting her up, and then he put his hand out to stroke her hair, and God sent an angel to protect Sarah. But the angel wouldn't do anything unless Sarah said something. And so when the Pharaoh put his hand out to stroke Sarah's hair, Sarah said to the angel, "Give him a slap." And the Pharaoh jumped out of his chair, and he ran round the room, opened all the cupboards, looked under the bed, behind the curtains, wondering, who's in this room? Who slapped me? But the room was completely empty, so I thought, maybe it's just my imagination. So he settles himself down in the chair again and came up with a different chat line. I don't know many chat lines. Anyway, and started chatting up Sarah. And again, he put his hand out to stroke her hair. And again, Sarah said, "Give him a slap." And again, he jumped up and ran round looking to see who else is in the room. Anyway, it went on like this for quite a long time. And at the end of the evening, Pharaoh was feeling all black and blue. Too much, what do you call it? Anyway, never mind. And he went to his own bedroom. In the night he had a dream, and God said, "Sarah is the wife of my prophet Abraham." So he got on his mobile, called Abraham round for breakfast, and said to Abraham, "I had a dream last night, and I'm going to give Sarah back to you." So what's going on here? So we know from the story of the fall, Lucifer seduced Eve, and Eve then, she had to decide, she had to choose between Lucifer and Adam. So from Eve's point of view, Lucifer was much more attractive. He was much more sophisticated, he's much older, much more powerful spiritual being. He knew loads of things, he could take her around the garden, show her this, that, and the other. Whereas so Adam was a teenager, and he liked playing with the beavers and organising a football match between the chimpanzees and the apes. And, you know, from Eve's point of view, he was kind of a bit on the immature side, because girls mature before boys. And so Eve then was taken in by and infatuated with Lucifer, and she ended up being seduced by Lucifer. He essentially was a paedophile. So what's going on here? So in restoration then, Sarah has been faced with a similar temptation that Eve was faced with. Sarah has to make a choice. Am I going to become the wife of Pharaoh, the queen of Egypt, the wife of the most powerful man in the world, and live a life of complete luxury? Or should I remain faithful to my husband Abraham, wandering around the Middle East, living in a tent and a sleeping bag? She had to make that choice, just like Eve had to make that choice. So Sarah then, she overcame the temptation to be seduced by Pharaoh, become his queen, wife of the most powerful man in the world, and she remained faithful to Abraham. So in that sense, she overcame that inherited aspect of fallen nature from Eve. So she purified herself, which meant that her own children were born with less fallen nature than she was born with. So that's what the purification of the lineage is. It's gradually, generation by generation, people facing these kind of challenges and temptations that Adam, Eve, the archangel Cain or Abel, or whatever it was, faced, and facing that temptation to do the same thing as our parents or grandparents or great-grandparents did, and overcoming that by following the conscience instead. And that's what it is. Gradually, incrementally, through the generation, through the lineage should get better if people follow their conscience and overcome the inherited stuff from the past, wrong ways of behaving, wrong ways of thinking, wrong attitudes, etc. And so, you know, it doesn't happen in one day or one generation. It happens over many generations, and gradually the lineage gets improved. And then it comes up to Christian marriage. So I'm skipping out a lot of what went before. So we look at the vision then of Christian marriage. What is Christian marriage? It's very similar to what true parents talk about. It's a sanctification of the union of man and woman for a Christian life together and for procreation. You know? So what is the purpose of marriage then? Well, again, it goes back basically to what it is to be a human being. So when we looked at a man, what was the biggest thing in a man's brain? It was yellow and it had 3 letters: sex. So the reality is that young men especially, they think about sex 100 times a day. See a beautiful girl, oh, I would love to have sex with her. Okay, that's just the way it works. Okay, so that's why men are very attracted to youth and beauty. And so see a beautiful girl and think, oh, I'm going to go and start chatting her up to see if I can get her into bed. That's the way it works. From a girl's point of view, young woman's point of view, she's thinking, well, if I have sex with this man, I might become pregnant. If I become pregnant, I'm going to have a child. So she's going to think, well, I know what he wants, but then, you know, what am I going to do? And so first of all, she thinks, well, okay, let's see, is he a good-looking specimen? In other words, does he look like he's healthy? Does he look like he's got good genes? Does he look like he's able to control himself? Good character? Has he got good status? Would he be able to support me and my child if I get pregnant and have a child? So she evaluates and looks him up and down like this. Then she says, okay, I think this person is a possibility. And then she'll say, well, supposing I become pregnant, do you promise that you look after me and our child? And he's thinking, that requires a commitment. And he may say, no, I don't want to make the commitment. Okay, that's fine. But he might say, okay, yes, I will take care of you and I'll take care of any children we have. But I only want to take care of my children that I have with you. So if I marry you, so if I do make that promise, then will you promise that you will only have sexual relationship with me and nobody else? And she's thinking, okay, but will you promise only to have sexual relations? And she says to the man, will you promise only to have sex with me and nobody else? Because she's thinking, well, I don't want him to share his love and his resources and take care of other women and other women's children. And so he thinks, okay, so that means I have to have an exclusive monogamous relationship with you. And he might say no, or he might say yes. So both of them have legitimate interests and concerns. And so if they both of them want to have a monogamous relationship. Now if they both negotiate this conversation and they say, okay, let's get married. That makes sense? That's how marriage evolved. That's how marriage developed. It's for the sake of a man and woman having children and for a sexual relationship, having a family. It's very, very logical. And then religion came into it later to support marriage. So when the government goes around changing the definition of marriage, then it's there's something wrong. You know, I know that the government in this country some years ago changed marriage so that you can now have gay marriage, but the government doesn't have the authority to do that because marriage is a social institution. Anyway, so then in Christian vision of marriage, it's a sacrament that both spouses confer on each other. Sacrament is a blessing. There's a blessing that each give to each other, and in that sense, they're each other's Messiah. And so I didn't explain the meaning of sacraments, but sacrament is like a sort of, an example of a sacrament is baptism. When a person is baptized, it's a sacrament they go through for the removal of original sin. So it's a ceremony that they go through, which prayers are made, and people receive God's grace through this ceremony. And marriage is one. So these are the conditions for marriage within Christian marriage and also within our own tradition. Both spouses are Christians. You might wonder why. Because that means they can share very deeply with each other. My wife is a very good friend, and she married someone. She is a very good Christian, but she married somebody who wasn't a Christian. And I remember she used to say to my wife, I love this person very much, but there's certain things we cannot talk about together. Certain things which are really important to me, because I pray and I have a relationship with God, but I can't talk to my husband about these things because he doesn't believe in God. And it was kind of, sad for her. Anyway, she took him to church and, eventually believe in God, he became a Christian, became a Sunday school teacher. And so she's happy because now she's able to share that aspect of her life with him. And so that's why it's important then. You can have a shared spiritual life, shared interests, shared values. But also it's important it's freely entered into. There's no forced marriage or arranged marriages in the Christian tradition. So this is a Church of England marriage. It's very good to read it and to think about it. And, one day, when you're engaged in, matching process or this kind of thing, to talk about these things with the person who you're thinking of getting married to, get some sense. This is the wedding as it would take place in the Church of England. In the presence of God, we have come together to witness the marriage. So all the family and friends come together, witness the marriage of, say, Nicholas, and Nicola, to pray for God's blessing on them, to share their joy and to celebrate their love. Marriage is a gift of God in creation, Adam and Eve, through which husband and wife may know the grace of God. So the whole vision from page 1 in the Bible is creating a God-centered marriage where God is present there. They may know the grace of God. It is given that as a man and woman grow together in love and trust, they should be unified with one another in heart, body, and mind, as Christ is united with his bride, the church. So there's that vision there of a unity, a God-centered unity in love. So as I said, it's freely entered into. So the priest will say, Nicola, will you take Nicholas to be your husband? Will you love him, comfort him, honor and protect him, and forsaking all others, be faithful to him as long as you shall both live? So here it's monogamous. You be faithful to him, as long as you shall both live. And to love, comfort, honor, protect, many, many different dimensions here. Keeping each other's back, supporting each other. and it's unconditional. So I, Nicholas, take you, Nicola, to be my wife, to have and to hold from this day forward, for better, for worse, for richer, for poorer, in sickness and in health, to love and to cherish till death us do part, according to God's holy law. In the presence of God I make this vow. So here it's a pledge of unconditional love. I'm not going to love you as long as you're healthy. I'm not going to love you as long as you've got a good job and you can buy me all the clothes and shoes that I want. It's you go through life together as a partner, supporting each other unconditionally. Person gets old, oh, you still love them and look after them. You know, person gets sick, you look after them, you care about them. So it's not just emotion, it's an act of will. Yeah? And so that's why it's a commitment. So love isn't just a feeling, it's a commitment, an act of will. And so that's why the reality of the world we're living in today, a lot of people, they don't want to get married. Why? Because they don't want to make a commitment. Yeah? They want to live together. And sometimes people say, okay, well, let's live together. We can enjoy together. We can cohabit. But then, you know, if a better person comes along, then I'll look for them. And often this is the way it is. And so, you know, when people are just having a casual relationship or cohabiting, these relationships are phenomenally unstable and break up very, very easily when somebody says, because I haven't made a commitment to you, so why should I stay with you? I didn't make any commitment. So I can leave you with a clear conscience. Yeah? And so this is why it's so important that sometimes people engage in relationships, in these kind of relationships, without knowing what they're getting into. And so I had a friend at university, very close friend, and you know, he was just a year older than me, and he used to tell me lots of stuff. Anyway, he had a girlfriend. They shared a room together in a house, a student house, and you know, after the 3 years, he's just going to graduate. And, you know, he's saying to his girlfriend, what do you think you're doing after we graduate together? And she said, well, I thought of going to this other city to do a postgraduate study. And he said, well, yeah, I guess I could move there as well. And then she said, well, why would you want to do that? And he said, well, because I love you and I hope to marry you one day. And she said, well, for me this relationship was just for university. After we graduate, I don't expect I'll ever see you again. He was totally gutted, telling you. It was just trauma for him, broken-hearted, closed his heart. It was, the pain he experienced was excruciating. And he never wanted to experience that pain again. You know, he talked to me a lot. He said, I never want to get that close to anybody again. I never want to find myself in that kind of situation of being able to be dumped, of being incredibly vulnerable again. And he said, actually, I'm going to find a girl, I'm going to do exactly the same to her what my girlfriend did to me. That's often what happens. That's the way the world works. That's the reality of human relationships when they go like that. So he was thinking, he had one kind of idea of where the future was going, and she had a very different idea. That's the problem when people just cohabit. They have different expectations because they haven't expressed anything. When you get married, you have to get yourself in that spiritual space where you can make those vows and you can make that commitment. It's very difficult, and you know that's why it's so important to do it publicly. And that's why often people don't want to get married, because they don't want to make a public commitment. Because when you make a commitment and make a vow, then to break that commitment, you feel guilty, you feel bad about it. It's really important. It makes something solid and substantial. And then, as a symbol, the exchange of rings. Heavenly Father, by your blessing, let these rings be to N and Nicholas and Nicola, a symbol of the unending love and faithfulness, to remind them of the vow and covenant which they made this day through Jesus Christ our Lord. Nicola, I give you this ring as a sign of our marriage. With my body I worship you. All that I give you and all that I have I share with you in the love of God. So again, it's unconditional, sharing everything. Yeah, with my body I worship you. So here you can see the sacredness of sexual love. That through sexual love, people actually come to experience that dimension of God's love. conjugal love. So it's the purpose of marriage for conjugal love, mutual support and comfort, proper place of sexual intercourse where I can enjoy all the different dimensions of that. It's not just physical, it's very, very deep. And for the procreation, raising of children. And the Christian view is when husband and wife united in marriage, they're no longer seen as something earthly, but the image of God himself. Which, of course, this is the principal view, which is the biblical view. And in Orthodox churches, like Russian Orthodox Church, Eastern Orthodox Church, same time as a couple are in the part of the marriage service, a crown is also held over their heads, because they also then become like the king and queen in their family. Again, we talk about that in the pledge, 4 great realms of heart, realm of the royal family, 3 great kingships, all these things, they're all part of this tradition. And then the family then is a home or domestic church headed by the married priests. So the parents then are like priests within the family to guide the family in worship of God. So, marriage blessing of true parents, there's 5 steps, the history of restoration, I'm not going to go through. Okay, so through the blessing ceremony, all these different elements of the Jewish Christian marriage and spiritual life are all there. Baptism, communion, marriage, and even ordination are brought together. I didn't talk about those sacraments, I don't have time. Anyway, for the first generation, as people like myself, we had to restore the foundation of faith. So that basically means living a consistent spiritual life, which means setting up conditions to separate from Satan. Things like 3-day, 7-day, 21-day, 40-day conditions, fasting, bowing conditions, cold shower conditions. And when you're making this kind of condition, I remember the first time I had a cold bath. I thought I'd have a cold bath every morning for 7 days. And I thought that'd be easy. It was January. The water's really cold. And I said a little prayer. I said, I'm not going to have a cold bath now. And I couldn't get into the bath. My feet were rooted to the ground, to the floor. And this voice came into my head. If you get into this cold bath, you're going to have a heart attack. You're crazy, you're mad. Who has cold baths? Nowadays, people think it's quite a good thing to do. But anyway, I thought I was mad. Anyway, and I realized, okay, why don't you run out of here? And I decided I'm going to have a cold bath, so I'm going to have one. So I said, look, legs, feet, get into this bath. Anyway, so I lifted my legs and I stood in the bath, and this voice came into my head, now you've done it, now you can get out. And I said, no, I'm going to sit down in this bath. And so I sat down, and a voice came into my head, now you can get out, you've done it. No, body, you're going to lie down in this bath. So I lay down in this bath. It was really cold. It's January, I'm telling you. And this voice came into my head, now you've done it, you can get out. No, I'm going to put my head under the water and count to 20. And I put my head under the water, counted 20, then I got out. And when I got out, my mind was as clear as a bell. And after that, I had many spiritual experiences. And I had a cold bath every morning for about a year. I thought, how can you live without a cold bath? Anyway, so that was restoring the foundation of faith, a consistent spiritual life of prayer and things like that. And so you're basically living according to your conscience. Then restoring the foundation of substance. Didn't talk about that. It's about overcoming fallen nature, becoming a mature person. Living and working together with brothers and sisters. We did this on fundraising teams. Some of you might join DAN or STF or workshops. You find yourself in a team with somebody normally you couldn't stand, or you would never talk to, or you'd never make friends with, from a different race or religion or social class or educational background or whatever it is. But you just lump together, having to work together and live together with this person. And you have to overcome lots of barriers of one's fallen nature and learn to be able to get on with and make friends, and or at least get on with anybody, no matter where they come from. And then part of that also is witnessing as well. And so that then is the foundation to see the Messiah and become a better person. So trying to get ourselves into reasonable shape for when we got married, blessed in marriage. Who wants to get married to somebody with loads of fallen nature? Nobody. So that was the whole point. Father set up this course to help us overcome our fallen nature, so we'd be in reasonable shape to get blessed in marriage. Some of us overcame more than others. So it's about grafting. This is in terms of lineage. Father talks about it like this. At what point can you be totally grafted into the lineage of heaven? The moment you receive the blessing from true parents is a great moment when the bonds to the satanic lineage are severed and you become part of the heavenly lineage. Most marriages in the world are not God-centered, but in the Unification Church, our greatest pride is in the name of the true parents, couples can enter into a heavenly, God-centered lineage. At that moment, they become direct heirs of God through the blessing. The process of the fall can be totally reversed. And so this is the idea of grafting. If you study biology, it's a bit like that. So in order to prepare for that, being grafted onto God's lineage, which is what that process Sarah was going through, in order for the grafting process to take place, we have to cut off all the branches of the wild olive tree. That tree, there may be many branches, leaves and buds. This is all our fallen nature, fallen habits, and fallen patterns of behavior and wrong ways of thinking. So let's say the true olive tree is very young, with very few branches, even though the wild olive tree has been growing for thousands of years, has 44 billion leaves and buds. The branches of that wild olive tree have to be cut off. So doing that and throwing away all our bad habits and traditions of fallen life, which is something we need to do before we go and get married and blessed. And then we inherit this. This is all for the first generation. And grows, develops. The blessing is important. It's not magic. Can we penetrate the thousands of years of customs and satanic world and bring a revolution? When the satanic root persistently remains, the fruit will not be good. So a satanic root, this is the fallen ways of thinking and acting and behaving and speaking and ways of looking at the world. And, if you carry on with that and you pass it on to your children, the fruit won't be good, even if one goes through the ceremony. The tree will not develop properly. In other words, perhaps its shape will be the same as the true olive tree, but the olives won't have any taste. How can God enjoy tasting poor olives? So after the engrafting process, after getting married, how do we transform the root into a new one? No matter how much effort is made by all 44 billion people in the cosmos, it will not come into fruition. Only by the power of the love of God and the true parents will that root be transformed. There are different aspects of this which are helpful: ancestor liberation, all these, ancestors and stuff we've inherited, cleansing the memories, replacing bad habits with good habits, and also resolving lots of inner problems that we have, either we've inherited or from our family background or whatever. Sometimes therapy or counseling is good for that. At deepest bottom of yourself is your original mind. Right below that is the fertile ground of God. Put your original mind into the fertile ground of God. The engrafting process means that. It's all very technical. And also there's the need for healing which takes place. And anyway, so there's no point in rushing through it without explaining it. I don't have time to explain it all, I'm afraid. Anyway, this is this idea then of being born again, and which is what Jesus talked about. And so these different stages. There's the engagement ceremony. So this is when father's matching people in Korea. This is for the first gen, for people of my generation, your parents' generation. And the next step was the holy wine ceremony. So this is what happened at, those who remember the workshop, what happened at Mount Sinai when God made a covenant with the people of Israel, and part of that covenant, Moses scattered blood on the altar representing God and on the people, showing that they were connected to the same blood lineage. And that's what happens at Eucharist when Christians take the bread and wine, also connecting to God's lineage through Jesus and the Holy Spirit. So there's a change of lineage or identity, which is most fundamental, from God's lineage to Satan's lineage to God's lineage, and a change of identity, sense of I am the child of God. And for forgiveness and original sin, and very conditional. So so we weren't really at the right level to receive it, but we did. If we didn't get it when we did, we would have been too old. Anyway, so this is how it worked. So we stood together as couples, and then someone handed a glass of wine to the woman. She drank half, gave it to the man, drank half, and gave it back again. And so this is a change of lineage. It sounds terribly theoretical, so I'll just tell you about my own experience. This was in Camberg in Germany. And then this is after the matching process had taken place. Father matched lots of couples together. And yeah, over a period of 3 days, matched about 200 couples, I think. I didn't get matched. Anyway, so afterwards, Father was talking to some people, and then he asked, just randomly, Father asked, as he does outside, is anybody here who wasn't matched like to get matched? You know, I was standing with a group of young men, and there was a group of young women who also hadn't got matched. And this young girl stepped out and said, yes, I wasn't matched. And Father said, were you in the room? She said, no, I wasn't. I'm not qualified. Because she wasn't, hadn't fulfilled the regular qualifications. Anyway, so Father said, okay, look, there's a group of young men over there. Why don't you go and pick one out? And so she's walking up and down, inspecting all these young men. And she kept coming back to me and looking at me. And Father was leaning against the wall in Camberg, the house, and thought this was, with a smile on his face, thinking this is hilarious. Putting this young woman, in this impossible situation of walking up and down, inspecting all these young men, and picking her own spouse. Anyway, she kept on coming and looking at me, and I had a feeling it was going to be me. Anyway, so eventually she turned around and she said to Father, could you choose, please? And Father said, what about that young man you couldn't take that you kept looking at all the time, you couldn't take your eyes off him? And that was me. And so we got matched. Anyway, so I went into the holy wine ceremony, and attendant came round with the holy wine, and I, while I was there, I was just like, it was a bit like trying to get into that cold bath, I'm telling you. I wanted to run out of the room. I thought, I'm mad, I'm crazy, I'm out of my mind, I have no idea who this person is, and this is completely bonkers. Why am I doing this? I have to escape and run out of this room as soon as I can. So my whole mind, my whole brain was full of these kind of thoughts. Just like I said, going to have a cold bath. Anyway, I said, oh, you're going to stay here and you're going to go through this. So I made myself stay there. Anyway, so my wife got the glass of wine, and she drank half of it. She gave me, and I drank half. And as soon as I drank it and gave it back, suddenly my whole mind and spirit became completely clear. And suddenly I felt like I was connected to eternity. I felt such an incredible deep sense of peace like I'd never experienced before in my entire life. And all that kind of stuff which I had when I wanted to make a condition, have a cold bath condition or something, all that stuff that was floating around in my head, wanted to make me run out of the room, that went away permanently. I still had my ups and downs, but I never went down that far ever again. It was more like going like that. And gradually, after time, one just goes a bit further up. Never plunges the depths that one plunged in those days of total hell. Anyway, so for me then, going through that, I felt like I've moved from Satan's sovereignty to God's sovereignty. I've now changed my identity. I've gone from one realm to another realm. And I realized that's what the change of lineage is. It's a change moving from one spiritual space to another spiritual space in the realm of God's protection, which is what Father said it was. I haven't got the quote here, don't know why. And then after that, there's a wedding. And so this is sprinkling with holy water. And as true parents doing that. And this is like baptism. And then the vows. And again, these are the vows which are at our blessing. I think it's all been shortened into one vow. To be perfectly honest, I think it's good to read the Christian vows because there's a lot there. Yeah. I remember when my wife became really ill, she was in a wheelchair. I thought she's paralyzed, wheelchair. Anyway, she recovered, thank God. But anyway, when all those things happened 15 years ago, I thought, that's my life. It's all these doors, things I thought I was going to do with my life, they've all closed. I'm going to spend the rest of my life pushing my wife around in a wheelchair, and that's it. I thought that's what I'm going to do for the rest of my life. But thank God she recovered, and so I've been able to do lots of other things. But that's, the way it is. One should take these things really seriously. Marriage, blessings, not something to be lightly undertaken. One needs to think these things through really seriously as a person, but also in the conversations you have with the person you intend to marry. You need to read all these kind of vows. Think, okay, what do these mean to us? So, this is a promise. You do promise to observe heavenly laws on original man and woman, and should you fail, do you promise to take responsibility for doing so? Okay, it's all a bit abstract, to be honest. Heavenly law, well, what's that all about? And so I suggest, if there's someone you're hoping to marry, one thing I could suggest you do is you read together the family pledge. Okay, what does this mean to us? Do we want to try and create a family like this? And if the person who you're in conversation with says no, then you have to decide, well, I want to marry this person if they don't want to create a family based upon this kind of vision of the family pledge. If they say yes, then say, okay, so how are we going to translate this ideal, which is embodied in all these sound bites, basically incredibly dense, concise phrases in the family pledge, how are we going to convert that into reality? What kind of traditions do we want to do? How do we want to go about creating a God-centered family? How do we want to go about creating a family, the embodiment of the three great kingships, the realm of the royal family, the four great realms of heart, cooperating in the spiritual and physical world, being a blessing to our local community? Do we want to live a selfish life, or do we want to get involved in our local community, spiritual community, but also what do we want to do with our next door neighbors? What kind of family do we want to create? What kind of couple do we want to be? A really important question to ask is, do you want to have children? It's dreadful, people expect the other person wants to have a child and they decide they don't want to. So these are really important, serious conversations to have. It's not just about, oh, I like this person, they're handsome or pretty, I've got all these nice feelings for this person. That's not a good basis for getting married. You really need to have serious conversations about this. Do you use an ideal husband and wife? Well, nobody's an ideal person, forget that. Do you as a mature human being, mature husband and wife, promise to establish a family that bring joy to God eternally? Establish a family is having kids. Do you promise to inherit heavenly tradition? And as the eternal parents of goodness, raise up your children to be examples of this standard before the family and the world? So again, think about, okay, how are we going to do that? If we get married and we have a family, how are we going to do that? What kind of traditions do we want to establish? Do you promise to be the center of love before the society, nation, world, and universe based upon the ideal family? And so people make those vows and promises to each other in front of God. And there's exchange of rings. And there's a blessing prayer. And then there's cheers of Monse. And then Father said, your destination is the eternal dwelling place of true parents. Mother and I are not going to be the only true parents. My goal is to make all of you true parents. It is the greatest honor that I can give you. In your own area and lineage, each of you is to become the true parents. And then there's this other ceremonies which the first gen did. For the second generation, well, how does that work? So a marriage blessing that Adam and Eve should have received and fulfilled. So basically, second gen, believe, are born without original sin, so no barrier to experiencing God. It doesn't mean that automatically you become perfect, because you need to make an effort. But it just means it's easier for second gen. My experience of looking and engaging with second gen, it's easier for them to have a relationship and experience with God than first gen. The first gen, it was really difficult. Endless numbers of fasting conditions and cold bath conditions, this, and this, and this. And for second gen, much easier, it's much less of a barrier there. But it's not automatic, So for second gen, receive the blessing after making the foundation of faith, which of course means what Adam and Eve had to do was living a consistent spiritual life and keeping sexual purity. It's really important. And then making a foundation of substance, which is mind-body unity, as I talked about, and becoming a mature person, and which basically means establishing the first blessing, which means becoming a God-centered person, developing the sense of God consciousness, living within the realm of one's conscience, and following one's original mind, and living a creative and fruitful and meaningful life. And so different stages in preparation for this. One is confession. I'm sure, the reality in life is, we all make mistakes. It's really important then to have a clear conscience when one starts to embark on this process, going to confession. If you made any mistakes, the reality is there's nothing you can possibly ever have done that God cannot forgive. You read the Bible, Cain murdered his brother. Did God forgive Cain? If you read it, Cain apologized and God forgave him. Anybody here committed murder? No. Okay. Well, that's a good start. Oh, yeah? I have many times in my head, I'm telling you. So no matter what you've done, God can forgive you. Whatever sin you've committed, God can forgive you. But it's really important just to confess. Own up, confess, have a clear conscience when you engage in the confession ceremony. So there's nothing in the back of the mind. And part of that in a preparation is having an interview with somebody, certain people who have that authority to listen to your confession and to be interviewed, ask various questions, see whether you're really ready. It's important to do, a workshop, 21 days or 7-day workshop, or go on some kind of program to help to develop one's spiritual life, DAN or STF or whatever. Actively engaging within our spiritual community. So one, is on that kind of page. Traditionally, it'll be a 7-day fast. Now I think it's reduced to 3 days or maybe 1 day, I don't know. Things are becoming easier all the time, I'm telling you. It's really important, sort of matching etiquette. It's vertical and horizontal. It's really important to be following your original mind and your conscience, but also it's about involving parents and the community as well. And so it's not just two individuals getting married, it's a joining together of two lineages, two families, parents-in-law, brothers-in-law, etc., etc. And it's really important that everybody should be supportive. You get the support from parents, brothers and sisters, and the community, and then you'll feel a lot better, the individual and the whole. Initiative then should come from the young person. It's at the end of the day, it's your marriage and your family. At the end of the day, you say yes or no, and you have to take responsibility for this. Your parents or other people may make suggestions, but at the end of the day, the initiative comes from you, and everybody should be happy. It means the couple and the parents and others. Then there's engagement ceremony, and Anyway, it's good to invest in this. Like everything, you have to invest. If you've got a friend, you invest in friendship. You do stuff together. You drink coffee together. You play games together. You play football together. You go walk on walks together. Go to the cinema together. You do stuff together. And the more stuff you do together, then the closer the relationship gets. So it's really important to invest in that. So set aside marriage time, spend time together. Family time is really important. And there's different things you can do. This is something called the marriage course, started by the Holy Trinity Brompton in London. I recommend it. Everybody should go on this course. If you're married, go on this course. If you're not married, then there's a marriage preparation course, which is run by them as well. And it's really important to do this kind of thing. There's lots of advice here, given here, about how to prepare for marriage. And it's really interesting, actually, this course, because they say that, there are couples who go on, before they get married, they go on this course together. And some of them, they discover each other and they go on to get married. And some of them, they discover each other and they decide they don't want to get married. And that's a good result. Nothing worse than getting married to someone and you think you knew who they were, but later you realize, oh, that was a serious mistake. So I'd suggest it's a really good thing to do, go on this marriage preparation course together. If you're in a matching process, someone you're engaged to, go on this course together, and it's set up so you can really you can prepare yourself for the next step. That's all I can say. And there's loads of good books that one can read. Okay, and lots of resources out there within our own spiritual community. These links are probably out of date. Links get out of date so quickly. but you just need to Google this sort of thing. Okay, I'm going to stop here. And, yep.